Mysterious and suspicious deaths and disappearances. Accidental death, suicide, or murder. Tragic, bizarre, mysterious, and sometimes too weird for words, so sit back, relax, and open your mind to the mysterious. During the Grateful Dead's more than 30-year-long existence as a band, much of their core lineup remained the same. You had Gerry Garcia on lead guitar, Bob Weir on rhythm guitar, Phil Lesh on bass, and some combination of Mickey Hart and Bill Kroisman on drums. The keyboard players, however, depict a completely different story. The band had 5 different keyboardists during their time. 4 of them died tragic deaths, and 3 of them died while they were still in the band. This led to the keyboard spot in the Grateful Dead being playfully referred to as the hot seat by members of the band and fans alike, and some do speculate that there might be some sort of curse attached to being the keyboard player in the Grateful Dead. Number 6. Ron "Pigpen" McKernan plays his final show with the Grateful Dead on this day, March 8, in 1972. Ronald Charles McKernan, born September 8, 1945, died March 8, 1973, known as Pigpen, was an American singer and musician. He was a founding member of the San Francisco band The Grateful Dead and played in the group from 1965 to 1972. Health and death. McKernan's headstone in Alta Mesa Memorial Park. The inscription reads, "Pigpen was and is now forever one of the Grateful Dead." McKernan's alcohol abuse had begun to affect his health by his mid-20s. By the early 1970s, he also began to experience symptoms of congenital primary biliary cholangitis, a rare autoimmune disease that was unrelated to his use of alcohol. After he was hospitalized in August 1971, doctors requested that he stop touring indefinitely. The organist and singer, a founding member of the Grateful Dead, was 27. The body was found at about 9 p.m. by his landlady. She had noticed that for a couple of days his car had been in the garage, the lights in the house left burning, and the back door open. McKernan was found lying on the floor beside his bed, half dressed as if about to get into bed. He had apparently been dead for 2 days. At press time, the Marin County Coroner's Office had not issued a final autopsy, but the suspected cause of death was hemorrhaging of blood vessels around the liver and the point where the esophagus enters the stomach. He had been under a doctor's care for cirrhosis. The coroner said McKernan had been following doctor's orders exactly to the letter. There was a chart beside his bed showing what he was eating and the time he was to eat it. McKernan had been living alone in a modified ranch-style place overlooking San Francisco Bay. A longtime friend of the group, in going through the apartment on Saturday, discovered a tape cassette McKernan had apparently recorded in the last week of his life. On the tape, he plays slow gospel blues piano and sings in an eerie, frail voice. One of the songs is extraordinary for the way the lyrics and phrasing shift in and out of stanza form, and the melody likewise seems to be making its own way independent of any repeating pattern. It is hard to say, suggests the discoverer of the tape, to who the song is addressed. Some places, I'm sure, are directed to individuals in the Dead family. Some of it clearly, maybe all of it on some level, is to everybody. The imagery of the lyrics is of separation and departure. Well, he drank himself to death. Toward the end, he was really skinny. He was down to about 126 pounds, and in his prime he was 180. He drank Junk Ripple and Thunderbird, even Thunderbird mixed with raspberry Kool-Aid. And even after he was making some money, the highest grade lush he ever drank was Bourbon Deluxe. He was never quite sober. Even when he woke up in the morning, he wakes up drunk. To make it worse, he used to drink and not eat. We all were telling him not to drink for years. Then he got sick, and he couldn't drink anymore. Ironically, about that time we all started to drink. The funeral was held March 12th at a modernistic, cinder-block and stained wood funeral home half a dozen blocks from where McKernan lived. About 200 people attended, nearly all of them friends from the acid test and Dead family scene, including Ken Kesey and head Merry prankster Ken Babs. At least a dozen Hells Angels, including New York Angels president Sandy Alexander, attended. There was also a tiny handful of conservatively dressed older people in attendance at the traditional Roman Catholic funeral. The night before the funeral there had been a wake, held at Bob Weir's home. There were tons of people there, said Dusty Street, maybe 75 or so. Lots of people I haven't seen in years, like Jason, the 8-year-old orphan of the hate, whose mother lived with the dead. The chicks knocked themselves out on it. There was lots of booze and no reminiscing. People sat around and listened to music and talked and got drunk. It's what he would have wanted. It was a good party. I'm glad I went. Number 5. Godchild played keys for the Grateful Dead throughout the 1970s. Sadly, he died tragically on July 23, 1980, from head injuries sustained in a car accident on his 32nd birthday. As Pigpen's health continued to worsen and the Grateful Dead continued to explore psychedelia, he was more and more absent from the keys. Then one day after a show, according to the 2017 documentary Long Strange Trip, Keith Godchaux's wife, Donna Jean Godchaux, walked up to the band and introduced them, and said to Gerry Garcia, "Keith is your new keyboard player." Keith's first show with the Dead had him filling in for Pigpen at the University of Minnesota Northrop Auditorium on October 19, 1971, and on New Year's Eve at Winterland that year, the band invited both him and Donna to join the Grateful Dead full-time. Keith was a classically trained pianist, contributing his talents to the grand piano. He added embellishments to the band's live sound that were detailed and intricate, and his contributions to the famous 1972 albums American Beauty and Working Man's Dead helped the Dead ease into a more roots rock-oriented sound in the 70s. Keith's peak with the band was in 1973 and 1974 especially. After the Grateful Dead took a touring hiatus in 1975, Keith began to spiral further into drug use. Keith Godchaux had played piano his entire life. Like Constantin before him, he had never played rock and roll until joining the Grateful Dead. His background was in Dixieland, big band, and cocktail lounge jazz. Throughout most of the 60s, he was the resident pianist at a lounge in Walnut Creek, a lazy suburb east of San Francisco. Godchaux officially joined the Grateful Dead in late 1971, with Donna coming along too as a vocalist. The earliest rehearsal tapes from September 1971 find the new keyboard player already comfortable and confident with the material. Both Godchaux's came into their own during the band's tour of Europe during the spring of 1972. Keith's piano and Fender Rhodes playing were instrumental in the evolution of the Dead sound and helped to construct many of the band's best-loved songs. Shortly before the accident, he professed to Pollock that he was the happiest I've ever felt in my life. He died at the age of 32 on July 23, 1980, 4 days after his birthday. Number 4. Brent Mydland played with the Dead 1979 to 1990. After being a Deadhead himself in the 1960s and 1970s, Brent Mydland joined the Grateful Dead in April of 1979. He had met Bob Weir and joined the side project Bobby and the Midnights, and that led to his invitation to join the Dead. Formerly, he had been a member of the country rock band Silver and contributed keyboards on one of their albums. Brent remained in the Grateful Dead until he died in 1990, making him the longest-running Grateful Dead keyboardist, and perhaps the most beloved. His first show with the Dead was April 22, 1979 at San Jose's Spartan Stadium. Brent's peak years with the Grateful Dead came in 1989-90 when the band was experiencing their last renaissance period. Gerry had mostly cleaned up his act, and some of that old magic had crept its way back in. Brent himself struggled with drug abuse as well as depression that came in waves over the years, but during his final 2 years it seemed that he had cleaned up a bit as well. Things were looking good after a strong summer tour in 1990, but Brent's tenure with the Dead was cut short tragically with his death on July 26, 1990 at the age of 37. He had accidentally overdosed on a concoction of heroin and cocaine, just 3 days after the Dead finished their summer tour. His final show with the band was on July 23, 1990 at the World Music Theater in Tinley Park, Illinois. Brent Mydland died at his home on My Road in Lafayette, California, on July 26, 1990, shortly after completing the Grateful Dead's summer tour. An autopsy conducted by the Contra Costa Coroner's Office revealed that Mydland had died of acute cocaine and narcotic intoxication. Richard Rainey, Contra Costa County Coroner, stated the toxicology tests revealed lethal levels of morphine and cocaine in the blood, a mixture commonly referred to as a speedball. He was the third Dead keyboardist to die, After founding member Ron Pigpen McKernan in 1973 and Keith Godchow in 1980, Garcia said Midland's death was crushing and it abruptly closed a chapter of the band's career. Number 3, with a long, strange twist. Bruce Hornsby played with the band from 1990 to 1992. Bruce Hornsby was another lifelong Grateful Dead fan that had his chance to join the band. Already an established musician himself, known best for 1986 hit The Way It Is, which was later made even more famous when Tupac sampled it in 1998. He first performed with the Dead at the Rainforest Benefit at Madison Square Garden in September of 1988, joining the Boys for a Rocking Not Fade Away. After that, he would occasionally sit in with the Dead whenever possible, and then in 1990, he joined somewhat officially for 18 months after Brent's death, contributing keys and accordion. He eventually left the band in March of 1992, and would occasionally join them again right up until the end of the road in 1995. Many consider Bruce's contributions on a piano in the 1990s to be some of the only shining moments for the band, and some even say that there aren't many post-Brent shows worth listening to other than the ones with Bruce, who managed to avoid the curse of the hot seat and is still alive today. Hornsby played more than Vince Welnick, rocked out from 1990 till 1995. Vincent Leo Welnick was born February 21, 1951, and died June 2, 2006, was an American keyboardist, best known for playing with the band The Tubes during the 1970s and 1980s and with the Grateful Dead in the 1990s. Vince Welnick reportedly committed suicide. Vince Welnick lived the dream, playing music with the Grateful Dead, but depression dogged him to his final days. When Vince Welnick signed on to play keyboards for the Grateful Dead, some people said it probably saved his life. He had 5 good years with the band, 5 fat years. But then Gerry Garcia died and the Dead was no more. Welnick spent the next 11 years dreaming that the band would reunite with him once again at the keyboards. That dream died on the cloudless morning of June 2nd, when the 55-year-old musician stood on a hillside behind his Forestville home and drew a knife across his throat in front of his wife. In the weeks before his death, several old friends who hadn't heard from him in a while were surprised by phone calls from a cheery, optimistic Welnick, talking about plans for the future. On June 1st, the day before he killed himself, he called pianist George Michalski, who invited Welnick to join him at his weekly restaurant job in San Francisco that weekend. The two debuted their 4-handed piano act in February at Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and had just received an invitation to return next year. He was all excited about it, Michalski said. And he told me he was going to come by the restaurant and jam Saturday night. After an earlier suicide attempt about 10 years ago, Welnick started taking antidepressants, but lately, he had been telling friends the pills didn't seem to be working anymore. When he died, according to friends, he was trying to wean himself from the old medication and begin a new drug regimen. Last words. Here and now, Welnick wrote, I want to appeal to the other members of GD to come together for such a worthy cause. Hope you all will pass the message on to the rest of the guys. More than ever, the world needs love and the Grateful Dead. Number 1. Gerry Garcia, American singer-songwriter, years active, 1960 to 1995. With the Grateful Dead, born August 1, 1942, San Francisco. Died August 9, 1995. Jerome John Garcia was born on August 1, 1942, and raised primarily in San Francisco Excelsior District, about 5 miles south of his and his band's famous future residence at 710 Ashbury. Years later, after brief stints in art school in the Army, and after surviving a deadly automobile accident in 1961, Gerry Garcia began to pursue a musical career in earnest, playing with various groups that were part of San Francisco bluegrass and folk scene. Gerry Garcia, leader of the legendary San Francisco rock band The Grateful Dead and a counterculture hero to 2 generations of music fans. Like his band The Grateful Dead, which was still going strong 3 decades after its formation, Gerry Garcia defied his life expectancy not merely by surviving, but by thriving creatively and commercially into the 1990s. Garcia was well noted for his soulful extended guitar improvisations. His long, strange trip came to an end, however, on August 9, 1995, when he died of a heart attack in a residential drug treatment facility in Forest Knolls, California. A legendary guitarist and cultural icon, Gerry Garcia was 53 years old. Cremated, ashes scattered at sea, specifically, half of the ashes scattered in the Ganges River in India. The other half were scattered beneath the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, California.